we all work for the library. Spencer was part of a group that ran a What's Cooking program a few years ago. This year they're trying to start it up again. Thankfully, COVID's pretty much over, hopefully. We're all getting back to our regular lives. So we're hoping to have a lot more social programs at the library, kind of combining a little social aspect with a little bit of education aspect. Each session that we're going to do about one session a month. Each one is going to have its own special theme. Today's theme is healthy eating on a budget. So this one's got a little bit of education involved in it, but not every session is going to have the same theme, and so not every session is going to have the same balance of education versus socialization. We're trying to make it as hands-on or as interactive as much as possible, so if you have any questions or if you have any information that you think some of us might be interested in, just open up your mouth and let us know. So today we're starting with healthy eating on a budget. With inflation going up the way it has been, it's getting a little harder to eat as healthy as we would like sometimes. I think most of us are familiar with the USDA recommendations for fat, carbohydrates, protein. It's typically found on most of the nutrition labels on all the stuff we buy in the grocery stores nowadays. So this is actually the old style. A lot of numbers, a lot of math, and so a lot of people didn't use it. I tried to make it as simple as I could. For most of us, we're talking about 1,600 to 2,000 calories a day. Women a little on the lower side, men a little on the higher side. Generally speaking, about a third of that should be fat, about half of that should be carbohydrates, and about 20% of that should be protein. So those are the big three called the macros. The other ones are going to be your micronutrients. Two of them that we typically want to be concerned with is sodium. A lot of our doctors tell us to cut back on our sodium, and fiber. A lot of doctors tell us to add more fiber to our diet. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, but in a little bit more easy to understand information format. So the USDA has switched from the old guidelines to the new guidelines, and they're calling that MyPlate. And with MyPlate, instead of worrying about the numbers, they're saying worry about the proportions. Trying to add vegetables that cover at least a quarter of what you're eating every day. Doesn't have to be balanced plate every single meal. Just try and make it a balanced diet. So on one day you can have as much cereal as you want, but make sure you balance that out for the rest of the week. And you can see they've simplified it. Fruits, grains, protein, dairy. So they tried to make it as easy to understand without having to worry about the numbers, and hopefully people will be able to use that information a little better. So they've done a study to see what's going on with how we're eating. I picked 16 and older because most of us are getting into that age range. Bad news is most of us aren't hitting the targets that they recommend is a healthy eating. They say we're not getting enough vegetables. This is the range we should be at, males here, females here, and both of us, guys and girls, are missing our target. We're not getting as many vegetables as we should be. Same with fruit. Grains, we're doing a little better. Men are eating in the right range. Women are pretty much touching on that too. There's another factor we need to look at when we talk about the grains though. Dairy, we're all low on our dairy. And proteins, men, we typically crave protein a little bit more than women. I don't know if it's a biological thing or a cultural thing. I don't know, guys just think we have to have meat. I don't know. And women are just willing to let it slide. Or maybe it's because guys crave more meat and women don't crave it as much. But men are doing fairly well on the protein. Women are a bit on the low side. So I told you there's a couple factors that we want to look at with grains. They divide it into two types, whole and refined grains. So we're all doing great on our refined grains. Our processed breads, our processed cereals, we're getting enough of those kinds of grains. Our chips, pretzels. The bad news is we're not getting enough of our whole grains. And we're getting too much of the things we don't want. We were talking earlier about the sugars. All of us are getting too much sugar. So same with our saturated fats and with our sodium, our salts. So men especially, but women aren't doing very well either. So what we want to do is talk about how we can use the MyPlate idea to try and improve our own dietary intake while keeping the cost low. So we're going to talk about mostly rice and beans today, but we're going to talk about a couple of other things too. So do either of you eat cereal on a regular basis? No? So very good. You do? So my mom, I live with my mom now. I bought the place and help taking care of her. She will typically go through a box of cereal a week, which isn't bad if she's buying the right cereals, but she doesn't always buy the right cereals either. So with cereals, we want to try to avoid the things like the Lucky Charms, all the stuff that has the added sugars. Good news is a lot of these cereals, even if you're eating them more than you should, have a lot of the micronutrients added to them. So you're going to get some of your vitamins and minerals that you need. They're trying to fortify these cereals to make them a little bit healthier, but you're going to get way too much sugar. So what we want to do, if we're eating cereals because we want something that's fast and easy, try to stick to something that's a little bit more whole grain rather than the refined grains. Got a lot less sugar, and you're getting all the fiber and bran that's part of the grain rather than getting that tossed away when they're making the processed type. So I myself prefer oatmeal. It's fairly easy to make. Like I said, I'm a lazy cook. Just boiling some water with some oatmeal in it, and I'm happy. Doesn't take me much work. I can have my morning breakfast. If you're the type of person who prefers to go for the instant oatmeals, be aware of what you're getting. So ignore the name brands, that doesn't really matter. If you're going for the instant oatmeals, try and get the unflavored kind. The flavored kinds have a lot of added sugar. That's how they get you to say, ooh, that tastes good, because it has a lot of sugar. And as we were talking about earlier, too much sugar is not good. So, with rice, we were talking about the fact that we have white and brown rice. White rice is considered a refined grain. Brown rice is considered a whole grain. And you can see that up there. Oh, did I put that on there? Yes. Good. So, doesn't mean white rice is bad for you. Just means that brown rice is probably a little bit better for you. But as long as you're eating some grains, you're probably doing pretty good. They do each have a different flavor. We were talking about that earlier. White rice is a little bit more bland. Brown rice definitely has a more noticeable flavor, especially if you're used to only eating white rice. So think about that when you're deciding how you want to prepare it. If I'm just going to have anybody grow up eating rice as a cereal? Really, my mom used to make us rice. She'd make up a batch of rice, a little bit of sugar and a little bit of milk, and we'd eat it just like we were eating a bowl of cereal. Really good. I enjoyed it as a kid. It was sweet, it had sugar in it, and rice was a pretty mellow taste. I tried the same thing as an adult with brown rice, and it was not the same. So I just didn't enjoy the intense flavor that I got with the brown rice, eating just the rice by itself. Since then, I've eaten it a lot more on a regular basis, and I've gotten used to the taste. But if you're not used to the taste, you might not enjoy it as much at first. We're talking about affordable eating. Try to go with the generic brands when you can. For most of the stuff we're looking at today, rice and beans, the name brand versus generic brand, you're not going to see much of a flavor difference. When you start getting into the actual flavored foods, you may, and that's just a personal preference on your choice. So, all right. So we've talked about the grains. The good thing about beans is beans count as both a vegetable and a protein. So with the beans, we're kind of getting a twofer. So especially when we combine our beans with rice. We're going to go through today, make up a batch of rice and beans, try a couple of different methods of cooking and mixing them at the end and see what we like. And then at the end of that, I crunched a few numbers for us, so we'll get a different idea or a better idea of how you prepare the food, whether it makes it a little healthier or a little less healthy. Still good, hopefully, just trying to keep it a little closer to the healthier side. Any questions? I grew up sort of like your son. My mom occasionally would make what she called baked rice, or baked chili, which is she'd make chili, add the rice to it, and throw it in the oven and let it kind of soak and congeal for about half an hour. It was really good as a kid. As an adult, I asked her how she made it. She told me it sounded like too much work. So I went to a more one-pot method where I would start to cook the beans. I prefer the dry beans just because they're a lot cheaper. And like I said, I'm a lazy cook, so sometimes I will go with the canned beans. The thing I don't like about the canned beans is you're typically getting a lot of sodium mixed in with them. So they're also going to be 2 to 3 times more expensive than the dry beans. So one serving or this, one can of this, and you're going to get a lot more black beans or a lot more value for your money if you buy the dry beans. The bad news is, of course, you have the cooking time. So when I prepare my beans, I typically do about the 1 hour boils. They typically have 3 recommendations. One is some people don't do any prep work. They don't do any pre-soak. They just throw it in the pot, start to cook it, and let it cook. Generally takes an hour or 2 longer than if you do a pre-soak. The shortened pre-soak method is to boil it up, turn off the heat, let it set for an hour or 2. It will soak up the hot water, softens up, and then go ahead and do your regular cooking method. And then the third one is typically the overnight soak. Let it soak in water overnight. That'll soften it up, and then you cook it up when you're ready for it. I did both of the batches we're going to see today with the 1 hour pre-soak. It's just more convenient for me. I get up, I start my beans, get them boiling, turn it off, walk away, do whatever I want for the next hour or 2, and then I come back to it and start my cooking. When I do my cooking, I typically will rinse the beans out, get fresh water in there, and then start cooking them with fresh water. Cook them for about 40 minutes, and then I'll check them to see if the consistency is getting to the point where they're starting to soften up. And at that point, I'll decide what I'm going to do with them. So if I'm doing some of the harder beans or some of the larger beans, like the chickpeas and the black beans and the kidney beans, I want to make sure I'm getting at least a good hour and a half cook out of them. So that 40 minutes is a good pre-cook, the first stage of cooking. That's the way I think about it. If I'm doing something a little smaller, like the lentil beans, those don't take nearly as long to cook. And so I'll do the large beans for the first 40 minutes, and then I'll decide if I'm going to add some smaller beans to it later on. I'll also do the same with the vegetables that I'm going to add to it. So a lot of times I'll like to chop up some carrots and add them in there. So I cook the beans the first 40 minutes without the carrots, and then I'll throw the carrots in for the next 40 minutes. That way they'll get softened up, but they won't become too mushy. It's mostly just a matter of texture. It's not going to change the flavor too much. It's mostly just what do you want to feel when you bite into your food. Same with my other vegetables. So the celery I might throw in around that 40-minute mark, or I might wait another 15 minutes before putting those in because I might want them a little crunchier. And I will definitely wait on my peppers or whatever other vegetables I'm adding to it because I don't want those to be too mushy when I bite into it. So something really firm like the carrots, I'll put in around my 40-minute mark. Something that I want to have a little bit crispier or not to be, that don't start off as crispy to begin with, I'll wait until about the last 15 minutes just to get them basically heated up to match the rest of them. So, all right, today we've got a batch of black beans, red beans, kidney beans, and garbanzo beans. Do you guys want to come on over? We can do some little food testing if you want.